Husband thinks I got pregnant to trap him. My husband and I have been married for 7 years. He lived next door, and there was an instant spark between us. Everything felt like a fairy tale. I always believed what made our family strong was friendship and mutual trust, though now my husband seems to think otherwise. Recently, my husband learned that his friend Jeff was manipulated. Essentially, Jeff's wife deliberately stopped taking birth control and got pregnant just a couple of months into their relationship and only confessed after the wedding. Jeff comes from a very conservative family, and his wife knew this. He felt obligated to marry her after the pregnancy news. Unfortunately, he now feels trapped to stay with her despite the toxicity because he took a vow and intends to stand by his wife and child. For some reason, this situation deeply unsettled my husband. I'm now 4 months pregnant, and yesterday he asked if I was trying to trap him with a baby. At first I laughed, thinking it was a joke, but he was completely serious and demanded an answer. Then I said we'd been married for 7 years, and he was already stuck with me, so the baby changed nothing. My husband didn't like that answer. He said a baby trap doesn't have an expiration date and that my intentions were clearly dishonest since I was laughing at his fears. He added that he used to trust me, but my laughing in his face completely destroyed his trust in me. I don't even know what he wanted to hear or how I should have reacted, so I suggested we discuss it in the morning. But in the morning, I woke up and he was gone. Instead, there was an angry text from his brother accusing me of getting pregnant without my husband's consent, even though it was our mutual decision. My husband vanished, no response to calls or texts. Now I just don't know what to do next. Update after 1 day. I wanted to quickly share news with those who gave me advice. I read every comment and message, thank you so much. While reading, I realized you were all right. I had every right to be angry in this situation. My husband insulted me and undermined our marriage, but I hadn't even processed it at first. I was so confused and upset that I felt no anger. Apparently, I needed time to grasp the absurdity of it all. I called my best friend, who's always been my rock. She came over with chocolate and was furious when I told her everything. After I vented, she called her husband, and he came over. He's a family lawyer and said he'd gladly represent me if I decided to file for divorce. He'll prepare the divorce papers on Monday. My mother-in-law brought my husband over shortly after my friend's husband arrived. She literally dragged him out of the car and hauled him to the door. She said he'd shown up at their place late last night, ranting about how I was using the baby to trap him. Thankfully, my mother-in-law is a smart woman. She tore into him and then dragged him home to apologize to me. My worthless husband never once looked me in the eyes, but said he was terrified of becoming a father and had projected his fears onto me. He claimed he wasn't sure if he was ready for such responsibility, but would get himself together like some hero. I nearly rolled my eyes. I called him a coward and told him to stay with his parents until I was ready to talk. I didn't mention the divorce papers yet. I didn't know how he'd react, but he'll find out soon. I also showed my mother-in-law the text from her younger son, and her face darkened immediately. I don't know what will happen next, but I doubt it's anything good. Right now, I'm just exhausted and want to curl up in a ball and cry. My best friend said she'd stay overnight, and we'd watch silly movies. I've also booked a therapy session for next week. I just need rest now. I'm devastated that my marriage has collapsed. Sorry for the sad ending, everyone. Final update. Thank you all for your messages and kind advice. So many asked for updates that I decided to post quickly. Things have calmed down somewhat. On a positive note, I had an ultrasound, and my mother-in-law came with me. Our baby girl is perfectly healthy. Yes, I finally know the gender. I'm having a girl, and I'm over the moon. My mother-in-law is an absolute treasure. She was deeply touched that I invited her to the ultrasound and is thrilled about becoming a grandma. She organized a family lunch a few days later. I was hesitant, but knew she meant well and wouldn't make things worse. When I arrived, my husband, his brother, and my in-laws were there. It was awkward until my mother-in-law asked if anyone had something to say. Her younger son spoke first. He apologized for his awful text, saying he'd been emotional and just wanted to support his brother. I told him how painful it was to receive such a vicious message, especially since he knew we'd been trying to conceive for almost a year. He hung his head and mumbled. That was all I heard from him that day. Then my mother-in-law looked at my husband with a pointed expression, but he avoided everyone's eyes. Finally, she spoke up and announced she would no longer welcome him in her home. She said she was ashamed of her son's behavior and would rather make space for her granddaughter than keep a coward around. My husband started to say something, but when she mentioned granddaughter, his eyes lit up. He'd always dreamed of a daughter and burst into tears upon learning the baby's gender. He suddenly tried touching my belly and asked if he could come home to paint the nursery. I made it very clear he wasn't welcome and that he'd destroyed all trust between us. I said even if I forgave him, I'd live in constant fear he'd disappear during future challenges, and I refused to be with someone who runs from hardship. He asked if this meant we were over, and I flatly told him I'd already hired a lawyer. My husband panicked, but I felt eerily calm, like I was watching everything from afar. He claimed it was unfair. He'd just panicked, while I was throwing away our life and robbing him of his daughter. My father-in-law reminded him this was the same trap baby he'd resented days earlier. My husband called it a mistake, but my mother-in-law fired back. How do you think she felt? Imagine being vulnerable, sacrificing your body to grow a human, only to have the person you trust most accuse you of something monstrous. He repeated that he'd projected his fears. I told him I'd felt shattered when he left because I'd dreamed of a beautiful family, and it all crumbled overnight. He insisted he wanted that life with me and our daughter, but let panic consume him. I said that was a pathetic excuse, especially since he hadn't even looked panicked when his mother dragged him to my door. He had no real response except to repeat that he was ready now and wanted to be with our daughter. But despite all his talk, he never genuinely apologized. After a painfully long conversation, lunch ended. My mother-in-law stood firm. He's unwelcome in her home. He begged to come back to our house, but I reminded him it's my house, bought before marriage, and it must remain my safe space, meaning he's not welcome. As far as I know, he's staying in a hotel. Finally, on Friday, he was served divorce papers at work. My best friend's husband had prepared them earlier, but I'd waited to be sure. Later, I saw missed calls and received sobbing voicemails asking if I was really destroying our family. I didn't reply. He even sent a crying selfie from his carmy friend, laughed about it for ages. My mother-in-law called after learning about the papers and said I was doing the right thing. She admitted she never wanted our marriage to end this way or for her son to be so heartless, but promised she'd always be there for me and the baby. She even tried apologizing for him, but I said it wasn't necessary. His actions were his responsibility alone. My best friend stayed all weekend. We even went baby clothes shopping at Tiny Light in all this darkness. I don't know what's next, but I feel calmer and confident I'm doing what's best. I'll update if anything major happens. For now, I just want this over so I can welcome my baby girl. Wish us luck. I adopted my wife's 3 kids. Now my parents say they're not real grandchildren. When we started dating, she was a single mom to 2 daughters and a son. I watched these kids grow up, read bedtime stories, bathed them, packed school lunches, attended parent-teacher meetings. I fully consider them my children, and they've called me dad for nearly 6 years. My brother recently became a father. I adore my niece, and my kids adore their cousin. Until now, my children were my parents' only grandchildren. They were always treated as family. My brother is their uncle. My parents are grandma and grandpa. We were visiting my brother when my parents arrived with gifts for the baby. My brother laughed and said they'd spoil her. My mom replied, "Since she's our first granddaughter, of course we will." My youngest daughter visibly deflated. The older 2 stayed quiet, but I saw their hurt. My sister-in-law tried to soften it. "You mean first infant granddaughter?" But my father shook his head. "No, our first granddaughter ever." I didn't want the kids hearing more, so I gave my son the keys and told him to take his sisters to the car. Once they left, I demanded to know why my parents acted like my kids weren't their grandchildren. My mom said, "They can't, but they're not your biological children." We'd planned to host Thanksgiving, but I told them to celebrate with their real family while I'd be with mine. I walked out mid-argument and reassured my kids they'd always be my children. DNA doesn't define us. My brother is now angry, saying I overreacted and should understand our parents' perspective. My mom texted, "We love your kids, but they're not our grandchildren. Don't ruin the baby's first Thanksgiving." I didn't reply. I stand by what I said, but I worry I went too far. Context. I formally adopted all 3 kids 4 years ago. My wife's parents are absent. Her ex lost parental rights before we met. The kids have no relationship with him. Ironically, my parents asked to be called Grandma, Grandpa. Update. We asked each child how they wanted to handle Thanksgiving. My son and eldest daughter are furious about how my parents hurt their sister. They'd consider reconciling if my parents apologized to her. My 10-year-old is heartbroken. They're the only grandparents she's known. We assured her this isn't her fault. She doesn't want to speak to them, but isn't angry, just deeply hurt. I called my father and explained how much pain their words caused. He claimed they never meant to hurt anyone, but can't change facts, and the kids shouldn't overreact to truth. I hung up. I can't force them to see my kids as grandchildren, but their refusal to acknowledge the damage makes it worse. I apologized to my brother if he felt caught in the middle, but my children come first. My sister-in-law intervened. He now wants his daughter to celebrate with us. We're hosting Thanksgiving without my parents. It's sad, but I won't force my kids to sit with people who show them no empathy.